As I sat there in the forest on that Alaskan mountainside, too cold not to shiver but too frightened to move, I couldn't help but think of how we all ended up there, fighting in the midst of snow and ice against the largest standing army on Earth. I looked into the faces of the men and women lying asleep around me. Wrapped in thin animal skin coats, they must have been no less freezing than I was. I wondered if they would all wake up when the time came. We all lay next to the unlit signal fire. No one dared strike a match, let alone light the whole thing, even if it meant saving our lives. As soon as we lit that fire, the warplanes of the almighty North American Republic would detect the infrared signature, and the cold would be the least of our worries. Maybe it was good that we were freezing. The Republic. That's why we were there. It was always the Republic's fault. The rebels blamed them for everything. The war, the starving children, and even the cold itself. That wasn't possible, was it? Did the Republic control the weather too? Of course not. So why were we here? I looked into their faces again. They looked almost peaceful. I decided it would be a sin to wake them, to disturb their sleep and bring them back to the harsh reality of war. Why were they here? There was Oliver Bridges, an old man, we called him old, but he was only 37, with a bushy mustache. He looked the least comfortable out of all of them. Perhaps he had seen too much. He had worked in a quarry, and when the people asked him why he joined the resistance, he wouldn't tell us. Maybe an accident happened that turned his head. Maybe they weren't feeding him enough. Or maybe he just got sick of all the paperwork. I could never tell. Then there was Bridget Tate. She had long black hair that stood out against the snow. Usually she wore a thick bearskin hat to cover it up, but it was lost a week ago, blown right off her head by a bullet that should have killed her. She came to the resistance shortly after I did. Rumor had it that she worked in a manufacturing plant for the army. Not a bad job, but I couldn't imagine anyone would like building weapons for a government that hates you. And then there was Sarah Weber. She wasn't like the rest of them. She came from the south, where the sun was always out and the temperature never drops below freezing, and everyone thought she wouldn't survive the first winter. Yet here she was, in her third year up north. She was almost as old as Oliver and had silky smooth white hair that seemed almost at home amongst all the snow and ice of these cold mountains. The Republic killed the man she loved. I reckon that'd be reason enough for anyone. Finally, we had Jim Roberts. He was young, almost as young as me. He slept with his hands on his rifle, and everyone trusted him because he smiled a lot. Those are the kinds of people you have to watch out for. I didn't trust him. He ran away from home after his parents had a fight, and shortly afterwards came to the resistance. In the beginning, just another lost child, and now an outlaw like the rest of them. I didn't trust Jim, and that's why I killed him first that day. Before I even left the campsite, I sealed my hand over his mouth and plunged my knife straight into his throat. His eyes popped open, wild, surprised and angry, but he couldn't shout and he couldn't breathe, and soon it was over for him. I walked down the hill, below the camping spot I myself suggested to the rest of the group. I took the explosive adorned with the Republic seal out of my pack and set it at the bottom of the slope, yanking out the small remote. With a single green flash, it told me it was ready. Ready to kill, like me. I was always ready. This is what the Republic did to people. It turned everyone into killers. I trudged away from the mountain, and then I did it. I turned back to watch the bodies falling from the cliff with the avalanche I made. I heard the screams. They echoed through the valley like shouts from the pits of hell itself. I nodded. I smiled. Another job done. Now I could go back to the Republic that loved me and tortured me with war, back to my family that wouldn't recognize me with all the blood on my soul. No, they would have another job for me first, another and another, until everyone was dead, and then it was just me and the government, and then maybe they'd kill me too, who knows, because they don't care much for anybody. Now I walk back to the city. It won't take much more than a day, assuming I make it. As I walk, I can't help but think about my own history. How did I get here? My father made me, I think. He's part of the government that feeds us and clothes us and enslaves my whole family. Everyone serves the mighty Republic, whether we want to or not. That much was made very clear to me from the time when I was a small child in elementary school, right up through combat training in secondary. That's why I fight. I fight because everyone tells me to, because it's the only thing I've ever known, and because I'm good at it. And someday, I'll be dead too. Maybe there'll be so many people dead that they can't keep the war going anymore. Maybe, finally, the politicians will have to fight each other instead of using us. The worst part is, I find myself hoping that doesn't happen.